report with shoulder and finger injuries. I don't detect a lot of concern about him potentially missing the game. I think Wednesday's a day where they want to back him off and maybe give him a full day off anyway as they manage him through the season at age 45. Unless he misses another practice, I would not be too concerned about this. Mac Jones of the Patriots, Brady's eventual successor there in New England. He missed the game with the ankle injury. He's been out on the practice field trying to do some stuff. I was told by someone there this morning that they want to wait till Friday's practice and see how the week went with Mac. I would still call it unlikely that he plays, and with Brian Hoyer in the concussion protocol, it could be the first career start for Bailey Zappi against Detroit for the Patriots this week. And Tua Tagovailoa of the Dolphins has already been ruled out for this week because of his concussion issues. The Dolphins will play Teddy Bridgewater. We don't know yet when Tua will play again. Obviously, a lot going on around that situation, including an investigation into why he was allowed back on the field. At this point, though, we're not going to see Tua this week, and we don't know exactly when.
We'll talk about that investigation a little later, but the coach, Mike McDaniel, yesterday was asked if Tua is able to go to meetings, if he's able to travel with the team this week. Here's what he said.
The only thing it's about, and that's the health of the human being. So, it's a change in routine for him. So, and he loves football and loves being around his teammates. It's another example of us having honest and forthright communication with the medical staff. He'll be around as long as it doesn't adversely affect him. He's a captain of this team, and we want him to be present as much as he can, but not at any sort of cost to his process getting himself healthy.
All right, so as he was talking, Bart just turned around, and I've had a lot of players on our set this week, Bart, who've been put off by the way the coach has talked about this. What about that didn't you like?
It's cringeworthy, right? Because he says we want to work in step, or I forgot how he said,
forthright
with the medical staff. Well, how do you know the forthright information is coming back from the medical staff? Obviously, something was wrong, something was missed, and you talk about I don't want to put a player at risk. Football is about putting yourself at risk, and they took a gamble. They thought, okay, if we put him back in the game, maybe he won't, get hurt on a short week. They put him at risk. And Teddy Two Gloves is good enough of a quarterback that it's not that big of a drop-off. So I'm going to argue that Teddy Two Gloves is a better quarterback at this point in his career. It's all about risk. You talk about Tua taking a risk. I just don't like the communication and act like they didn't know, they were unaware that he had tremendous damage.
All right, so we're going to leave that part of it for the moment. Dan was telling us earlier there is an investigation into this that is being conducted by the NFL and the Players Association into how all that was handled. There might be some results from that today. If there are, obviously, we will have them. In the meantime, let's spin it forward if we can for this team. They got off to an unbelievably good start down there in South Florida, Mike T. That feels like a very long time ago. They go play a Jets team that has a little momentum on their side this week with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback. We're going to put the picks up there on the screen. How do you see it this weekend for the Dolphins in New York?
I like the Jets. It should be a close, low-scoring game. You have two teams that have really good front sevens. Two teams whose each respective offensive line is dealing with a lot of injuries. And because the Jets are at home, and look how Zach Wilson drove their team in the fourth quarter against Pittsburgh on the road. I just like Zach Wilson a little bit more than Teddy Bridgewater in what should be a low-scoring game.
Dan Graziano, your face, folks at home couldn't see it, but you were quite stunned to see all that green on the screen.
I did not think I'd be alone with this pick, that's for sure. Maybe I haven't thought enough about this game. I do like the Jets more than I think a lot of people do this year in terms of their roster and the caliber of players they have. I think the Dolphins have a little bit more.
You're close to the situation, Bart, with the Jets. This is an energized fan base. Believe me, I hear from them every single day. This would be a big win for the Jets. Last week was a big win. This game against this division rival that has got off to this very hot start, even without their quarterback, this would feel like a real affirmation of what the Jets are doing if they pull it off on Sunday.
Oh, yeah. You talk about bringing some of those receipts and starting to cash them in and ask for the rebates back. You talk about, Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed. I think really we don't talk about this duel at the cornerback position. I think they match up well. Yes, of course, they don't have the speed to keep up, but I think the fact that Miami doesn't particularly run the ball well allows this front seven to stop the run with a light box, allows them to apply a lot of their resources. And then Zach Wilson, right? Really starting to come of age and really started to show that some of the offseason work he did with his receivers are starting to pay dividends in the communication that he could potentially be a franchise quarterback. He showed it in Pittsburgh, a tough environment.
I'm curious if Miami starts to use the running backs a little bit more with Teddy there, because they did invest.
In Sunday morning, Giants, Packers, here we go. Aaron Rodgers and Green Bay coming off what could be described as something of an ugly win in which they barely beat the Patriots in overtime. Last week they take on the G-Men, who you see there. After Sunday's game, Rodgers had this to say about where his team is right now.
This is a game we had to win, for sure. I mean, you can't be 2-2 losing to a third-string quarterback and not playing great in all three phases. So we had to have this one. This way of winning, I don't think is sustainable because it's just pushed too much pressure on our defense, and obviously I got to play better and will play better.
Why did you laugh? You couldn't hear it at home, but you, as he was saying that, you were laughing. Why?
I mean, I just love how he keeps it real, man. Like, we can't lose to a third-string quarterback that played at Western Kentucky. Like, what are we talking about? We struggle. So if we go against a better team, we got to all collectively step our game up. You talk about Romeo Dobbs, you got to catch that ball. Right, and it's interesting. I love the comparison like between Mahomes and Rodgers right now because both of them have what we think as supporting men. They don't have any lead men outside of Travis Kelce. But you look at what Mahomes is doing with his new pieces and his parts that aren't the same what he's used to having, and we look at what Aaron Rodgers is doing. I think they're going to get better every week, but they have a long way to go as far as being reliable. And if Aaron Rodgers doesn't trust you, just ask Valdez-Scantling, he'll get you up out of there. He won't throw you the football.
Well, look, I mean, Mike T., there was something else about those comments when we heard them in our meeting this morning that sort of rubbed you the wrong way. What was that?
Yeah, agree. When you add to it the week before when he basically called out Romeo Dobbs and Christian Watson, their two rookie receivers, he's talking about, again, their offense not performing well. That is squarely on the shoulders of Aaron Rodgers. You are coming back to win a championship. You don't have Devontae Adams. In May and June, you should have been picking those guys up at the airport. You should have been having your own walkthrough. You could email them, text them. Greeny, you made the point. That's what Peyton Manning would have done. And when the margins are so small and you're going against Tom Brady and Matt Stafford in your conference and guys like Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, you have to do everything you can to win a championship. And I just think his comments fall short with his actions in late May and early June.
Now, these remarks from Tannenbaum have made Graziano grumpy this morning. What don't you like about that?
When Mike Tannenbaum was a GM, he was prohibited by rule from criticizing a player for skipping out on voluntary workouts, right? You could get fined for that if you did that publicly when you were actually a GM of a team. And now you can sit here and say it from the GM's perspective. Every GM wants to say this when a guy skips voluntary workouts, right? Like, he should be here. It's important, but you're not allowed to. But now you are, and I still think it's wrong. Like, I have been as critical as anyone of Aaron Rodgers and his clownish behavior on a number of fronts over the last couple of years. But I cannot sit here and criticize a guy for not going to voluntary workouts when that is his collectively bargained right. He believes that it's the coach's job to handle the young receivers in the offseason, and he gets there in training camp and picks that up at this point. There's more than one way to skin a cat, right? Patrick Mahomes spent the whole offseason throwing with these guys while Aaron's off drinking whatever the tea is. Like that's fine, but they're still 3-1, just like the Chiefs are, and I think they are going to get better as the weeks go along.
But they struggled against a backup quarterback and could have easily lost that. Yeah, I understand that, but to Tannenbaum's point, like, we compare the GOAT and the BOAT, and you decide who you want the BOAT to be. We know who the GOAT is. The GOAT got kicked out of a park in the middle of a pandemic with receivers that he had been working with. So you can't complain about the chemistry and the execution because it's about the nonverbal communication. We see a lot of the disciples of Sean McVay struggle early on because they go about business a different way. They don't have contact in practice. They don't do a lot in training camp. They try and protect their players, but then they get off to these slow starts. Unfortunately for Aaron Rodgers, he can get off to a slow start because the division is not that good right now.
But they're 3-1. They didn't get off to a slow start.
But is it a real 3-1? We know who owns it.
It is. It's 3-1. It counts.
Yeah. But it's different,
let me get
3-1.
Final word from Tannenbaum. Go.
Yeah, Greedy, this is about CBA compliance. We could trot out there with a whole bunch of average quarterbacks. If the object of the exercise is to win a championship, and presumably that's what it is since he came back, as Bart alluded to, Tom Brady's out there looking for parks in Tampa Bay to just get a little bit better, and that's where I think it falls short between what he's saying he wants to do and his actions, and that's why they're struggling. They are 3-1, but look who they've played, and that could be the difference when we get down to games that matter late in the year.
Here's what I'll say. Brady
2 weeks ago, they went into like Tom Brady's so good about it in the offseason, but he lost.
Well, Tom Brady, come on now. We can do this exercise. All 3-1s aren't the same. All 3-1s are the same.
3-1. They are 3-1 at a time in the season that they haven't played their best, and they did go into Tampa and beat the Buccaneers, which matters.
They were decimated.
But it still counts.
Okay, a couple years ago, we sat here, Greeny.
Yeah.
And Pittsburgh was 11-0.
Yeah.
And we told you that was not a legit 11-0.
You did.
And they got bounced.
Here's what I'll say, because I need to get to a break.